One mistake was enough to kill an entire family before spring arrived. Imagine standing in the center of a mud-slicked village square in late January. The year is 1315, and the night sky is as black and cold as iron. You are drenched in sweat, yet your teeth are rattling so violently they ache. You can barely hear the wind howling over the ragged thatch roofs because of a far worse sound. Your youngest child, shivering beneath a pile of moldy straw, gasping for air that feels like shards of glass in their lungs. You did everything you thought you were supposed to do. You locked the door, you barred the shutters, and you banked the hearth. But as you stare at the dying embers, a cold dread settles in your stomach. You realize, with horrifying clarity, that you did something wrong weeks ago, and now there is no way to fix it. You look out into the pitch-black night, wondering if the smoke coming from your neighbor's roof means they are warm, or if they are already dead. Could you survive a night like this? Or would you fall victim to the silent trap waiting in the dark? Because right now, in the dead of January, winter has only just begun. The first lethal error wasn't made during the blizzard. It was made months ago, under a bright autumn sun. You see, most people think medieval peasants died because the temperature dropped. They didn't. They died because of simple, terrible math. To survive 4 months of freezing dark, a single family needed tons of dry wood. Tons. But autumn was harvest season. If you spent your days chopping oak and beech, your crops rotted in the rain. If you harvested your grain, you ran out of fuel by February. So you gambled. You stacked your pile high, looked at it with pride, and told yourself it was enough. By late December, the trap springs. You walk out to your shed, wipe the frost off the logs, and realize with a sudden sickening drop in your chest that half your wood is gone, and you aren't even halfway through winter. You begin burning wet green branches that spit useless sparks and fill the room with blinding smoke. You start rationing logs, letting the fire die down to a ghost of a flame, just to save 2 extra hours for tomorrow. The cold inches closer, sinking into the earth, crawling up through the floorboards and settling deep into your bones. But that wasn't the mistake that terrified villagers the most, because even families with plenty of wood still died. Your home is not a sanctuary. It is a dark, timber-framed box filled with choking ash. To keep the heat inside, you have stuffed every window crack with moss, clay, and animal fat. There is no chimney, just a single hole in the roof that lets out a fraction of the smoke and lets in a relentless stream of freezing rain. To survive the plummeting temperatures, you are forced to make a desperate choice. You pull your livestock inside. Your oxen, your pigs, and your last remaining sheep are brought right into the main room, sleeping just feet from where your children sleep. The smell is overpowering, a thick, suffocating wall of damp wool, manure, and burning peat. But their massive bodies throw off heat, and in the freezing darkness, that animal warmth is the only thing keeping your blood flowing. You lie there in the blackness, eyes burning from the acrid soot, listening to the heavy breathing of beasts and humans squeezed together in the filth. You are warm enough to stay alive, but the air is poison. Moisture from your breath drips off the freezing mud walls. Black mold spreads across the roof beams. Disease blooms in the humid damp. You endure the stinking, suffocating dark because you think you've bought yourself time. Then hunger arrived. By mid-February, the grain bin sounds hollow when you scrape the wooden ladle against the bottom. This is the third mistake, misjudging the pace of your belly. In November, when the feast days were fresh, a thick bowl of pottage, a boiled stew of oats, peas, and coarse rye felt like a guarantee of survival. But winter makes the body crave fuel, and the winter is dragging on far longer than the elders predicted. The cellar is nearly bare. The salted pork is gone, leaving only a tub of rancid brine. By mid-February, the grain bin sounds hollow when you scrape the wooden ladle against the bottom. This is the third mistake, misjudging the pace of your belly. In November, when the feast days were fresh, a thick bowl of pottage, a boiled stew of oats, peas and coarse rye, felt like a guarantee of survival. But winter makes the body crave fuel, and the winter is dragging on far longer than the elders predicted. The cellar is nearly bare. The salted pork is gone, leaving only a tub of rancid brine. Now comes the silent, heartbreaking agony that played out in thousands of hovels across medieval Europe. Every meal becomes an agonizing calculation. You look at your spouse, then down at your children's hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. You start taking smaller portions. Then you pretend you aren't hungry at all, sliding your thin crust of dark rye bread across the rough wooden table toward a weeping child who doesn't understand why father isn't eating. Your body begins to consume itself. Your muscles ache, your head throbs, and every movement feels like dragging iron weights through deep mud. You are starving in the dark, watching the people you love melt away day by day. Would you give up your own food to save your family, knowing it meant you might not see the morning? As the frost hardens the mud into stone, a quiet poison takes over the village. Isolation. When resources run low, human nature twists. You lock your door tighter. You pull your shutters close. A terrifying pride sets in, fueled by shame and fear. You refuse to let your neighbors see that your smoke has stopped rising, or that your children are crying from hunger. To ask for help is to admit you failed. And in a world where everyone is clinging to the edge of an abyss, showing weakness feels like an invitation to be abandoned. Families retreat into their own private hells. Across the narrow lane, just 30 yards away, your neighbor is starving too, but neither of you crosses the snowdrift. Pride tells you to hold out one more day. Fear whispers that if you ask for a cup of grain, they will see your desperation and turn their backs. So the village breaks apart into isolated pockets of silence. You sit in the dark, listening to the wind, convincing yourself that everyone else is faring better than you, until the silence becomes absolute. Days pass. No one knocks on your door. You knock on no one's. Sometimes silence killed faster than winter.
Everyone look to the east,
and then,
quickly now.
Just as the village reaches its breaking point, something shatters the spell. A door opens. A weak, shivering figure stumbles out into the snow, dragging a heavy wooden beam toward a house whose roof has collapsed under the weight of ice. Another neighbor sees them, hesitates, and steps outside into the biting wind. Then another.
All right, lift together.
The villages that survived weren't the ones with the biggest food hoards or the sturdiest walls. They were the ones that broke the silence. When the worst blizzards hit, survival became a collective act of defiance. Men and women pooled their last remaining logs to keep a single, massive fire burning in the village hall or the church, sleeping side by side on the stone floor to share every drop of body heat. They shared the last bitter bushels of peas, stretching them into thin soups to keep every child alive for one more week. They cleared snowbound tracks together, buried the dead together, and kept watch through the frozen nights so no family died alone in the dark. They realized that a single person in winter was a corpse, but a village was a fortress. Could modern society survive like this if the power went out tomorrow? Then, one morning, the wind changes. It doesn't blow from the icy north anymore. It carries the wet, heavy scent of damp earth and melting frost. You push open your swollen wooden door, wincing as the blinding light hits your eyes after months of sulphurous dark. Water drips from the eaves, a sweet, rhythmic sound that feels like a miracle. You walk into the village lane. Doors creep open all around you. Gaunt, pale faces step out into the pale spring sunlight. You look into the eyes of your neighbors, hollowed by fear, lined with grief, but undeniably alive. The bitter frost exposed every weakness, every selfish instinct, and every miscalculation. The families who tried to hoard their grain, who hid behind locked doors, and who let pride keep them in the cold, were gone. Their homes stood empty, dark monuments to the myth of self-reliance. The ultimate truth of the medieval winter was brutal, simple, and timeless.
Here, take this.
The villages that survived weren't the strongest or the richest. They were the ones who understood that surviving winter alone was impossible. If you had to spend one winter trapped in a medieval village, which modern comfort would you miss the most? Because as you stand in the spring mud, feeling the weak sun on your skin, you realize that the warmth wasn't what kept you alive. It was the hands you held in the dark.